SNAFU, situational normal, or founder is really just a term for the many things that happen at the bottom of the pyramid, the Marine Corps, indeed in the military. The results of ineffective leadership or inefficiency or just minor mistakes are felt greatly at the tail end of the whip. If you Google what exactly is a cluster F, what should come up is a great explanation.
Monumental decision about America's longest war.
20 years, 2,400 American military deaths, and $4 trillion. U.S. troops are leaving Afghanistan.
When you move the chess piece on the board, somebody else moves into that position. Who is that?
It's about whether the Afghans can prevent the Taliban and al-qaeda from regaining a terrorist.
There's been no let-up in fighting.
I trust the capacity of the Afghan military.
The Taliban is now in control of Afghanistan.
He is considering the August 31st deadline. The Taliban calling it a red line.
There are reports of shots being fired.
The stunning collapse of Afghanistan plays out in real time.
We're ending America's longest war.
What is the difference between the Marine Corps and the Boy Scouts of America? The answer is the Boy Scouts have adult leadership. So it's one of those jokes, mildly funny when you first tell it. We told it and retold it, and it was funny. They were funny in that half-bitter, cathartic way that such jokes are funny if you are using them to mitigate your sense of powerlessness. Military planners, you always have some contingency plan, no matter how unlikely you think an event is to occur. If it does occur, if the events are going to be catastrophic, you plan for that. And so ignoring that, ignoring the ramifications of any decision that you make or order that you pass, I suppose would come within the category of SNAFU. 2 decades of war, no one goes through actual combat and remains unchanged, at least as if they're a normal human being. For most Americans who served there, Afghanistan was deeply imprinted on their souls. So watching everything come crashing down, watching the situation in Afghanistan now being probably worse than anyone could have anticipated, and we are totally shut out. Yes, huge emotional impact. We have a saying in the military: the most important thing you have is your reputation. It's not even rank. It's not necessarily authority at any given time. It is your reputation. Starting from the bottom, the operational commander for Central Command, and it's commanded by a 4-star general, and that general is General Ken McKenzie. It's his job to translate broad guidance, strategic guidance into operational plans on the ground. General Mark Milley is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His role is in an advisory function. However, he also carries considerable weight because at times he represents all of the heads of services, and as the senior uniformed official in DOD, of course, he has considerable stature. Well, let's just talk about Secretary Austin, the person that has been clearly visible to the public. The secretary, as a 4-star general, had a reputation for just not embracing decisions, when you needed decisions to be made. And that causes that causes a great deal of frustration beneath you. You know, a lot of us, I think, would rather have a tyrannical commander than one who simply avoided decisions. Back in 2015, there was a hearing before the SASC involving then General Austin in his capacity as commander of Central Command. One of the topics within that testimony was the progress of the Syrian Train and Equip program. The idea being to raise a Syrian Arab force to fight the Islamic State. General Austin was being questioned pretty closely about this particular program and admitted to the fact that it had not produced a great number of fighters. Indeed, 4 or 5 was the number that he gave.
It's a small number, and the ones that are in the fight is we're talking 4 or 5. So.
How do you admit that $500 million on that program resulted in the training of, quote, General Austin at the time, 4 or 5 Syrian fighters? Even McCain, you know, at the time said, I don't think I've seen anything like this in 3 decades.
I must say I've been a member of this committee for nearly 30 years, and I've never heard testimony like this. Never.
And yet the military itself did not take care of clearly what was a problem there. Okay, so fast forward, you've got a new president coming in, and he has promised to end forever wars and no more nation building. These are campaign promises.
It's long past time we end the forever wars.
And he has been involved in the past closely with military operations overseas, so maybe he regards himself as a little bit of an expert. And is prepared, in fairness, he is prepared for military pushback. That's what I'm speculating. So he wants a very quick result, and it's hard to think of any other reason than for political theater. General Scott Miller was the last U.S. commander in Afghanistan, and on departing, we had 2,500 troops, service members on the ground at the time. He said, look, with this small residual force, because they're made up of the right, kind of the right guys, the right expertise, carry a significant weight. There wasn't a huge footprint, but the roots that were there were so foundational to the Afghan cause, the Afghan government's cause, that no one really, without any sense of foresight, could say, hey, we'll yank them out and the Afghan government will not collapse. The military will not collapse. That was the warning, the implicit warning from General Miller. The first real indication, I think, as far as the public were concerned, was a press conference held, as the crisis is kind of coming together. They knew that Afghanistan was first and foremost in everyone's mind. And so I felt that Secretary Austin launching in with a long monologue about his trip to, Asia was unnecessary delaying tactic.
I'd like to start by talking briefly about my trip later this week to our priority theater of operations, which is, of course, the Indo-Pacific. And then I'll add just a few words on Afghanistan. It looked transparent at the time, and then unfortunately, he and General Milley both say, all the plans are laid for a safe and orderly withdrawal, which is not true. General Milley then goes on to say, we'll closely monitor the situation and make adjustments as necessary.
A negative outcome, a Taliban automatic military takeover, is not a foregone conclusion. We will continue to monitor the situation closely and make adjustments as necessary.
You would have to ask, how are you going to make adjustments? You just pulled out the last footprint of U.S. troops. It really just felt as though they were talking down to the press, and in so doing, they kind of lost the ability to be taken seriously. when General Milley kind of took front and center stage, I didn't know if that was an agreement between the three, but I felt that General Milley's logic was flawed.
If all this is true, General Milley, why haven't you resigned?
In answering the questions the way he did, he really, I felt, showed that he didn't have a good understanding of his professional ethics.
My statutory responsibility is to provide legal advice or best military advice to the president, and that's my legal requirement. That's what the law is. The president doesn't have to agree with that advice. He doesn't have to make those decisions.
The other thing he brought up, he said, hey, you know, those kids down on, in Kabul in the airport, he said, well, they didn't have a chance to say no, so I didn't have a chance to say no.
You know, my dad didn't get a choice to resign at Iwo Jima, and those kids that are at Abbey Gate, they don't get a choice to resign, and I'm not going to turn my back on them. I'm not going to resign. They can't resign, so I'm not going to resign.
Which, you know, does seem illogical. It is true that as fairly junior enlisted guys or junior officers, no, of course you don't have the opportunity to say no. But if you're at a 4-star general up at the level he's at, and your role is really as an advisor, and you foresee catastrophe happening, and you don't dig in your heels, then what is your centerpiece of decision making? Are you continuously going to fall back, or is that ultimately something you're going to make a stand on? No one can obviously predict the future, but your prediction of what you believe is going to happen, what is most probably going to happen. And if what is going to happen is as bad as what we saw, then, you know, that is the time to stand your ground and simply say, no, boss, I'll give you my resignation. Can you imagine if those 3 or even 2 out of 3 had offered their resignation? You don't think that might have caused the president to think twice? Austin, General Milley, General McKenzie, all 3 of them, they're honorable men. How are these 3 holding themselves responsible? I've seen all 3 of them during the 90-day period use that term, but it's very difficult to explain exactly what that means if you continue in office. Holding yourself responsible often is a prelude to resignation. That's really the ultimate sanction. So it is hard to take them seriously. They kind of render their own words hollow by taking no subsequent action. It's a culture that I think is amiss, certainly not individuals. Because as a military professional, our duty isn't simply to follow orders. There is a point where if we see something that is happening catastrophic to the institution, then doesn't our oath to that Constitution obligate us to take action? That responsibility to speak up becomes all that much more important, and we've just seen why.